Captain Jorax Menz shifted uncomfortably in his exoskeleton as he reviewed the combat footage for the 20th time. The recording showed a human soldier continuing to fight after taking 3 direct plasma hits to the torso. It defied all reasonable combat protocols. Computer, append to official documentation series, tactical assessment of human combat capabilities. Entry 47, Jorax said, rubbing his primary sensory appendage in frustration. The specimens continue to confound standard military doctrine. When the hegemony first encountered humans during the mining dispute on asteroid KX-429, the military leadership had laughed. Actually laughed. How could these soft, fleshy creatures with no natural armor, no significant strength compared to other species, and primitive projectile weapons possibly pose a threat? Our initial assessment was catastrophically incorrect, Jorax muttered as he watched another clip of a human dragging an injured comrade while simultaneously returning fire. These creatures simply do not stop. Jorax's assistant, Lieutenant Pelnar, entered the observation chamber with new data packets. Sir, we've established additional monitoring stations around the human positions as ordered. 17 observation posts in total, all with full sensory arrays. Excellent. Maybe now we can figure out how to predict when these lunatics will finally back down, Jorax said, not bothering to hide the skepticism in his voice. Pelnar's skin shifted to a concerned purple hue. The High Command is growing impatient for results, sir. They're asking how a species that evolved on a single planet could possibly resist our superior forces. Jorax barked out a laugh that contained zero humor. Tell them I'm still trying to figure out why humans don't have an off switch. Every other sentient species we've encountered knows when to surrender, when to retreat, when to accept defeat. These humans just keep coming. He turned back to the screens showing human soldiers fortifying their positions despite taking heavy losses. Their red blood splattered across makeshift barricades as they shouted encouragement to each other. We need to understand them before we engage in full-scale conflict, Jorax said quietly. Because right now I'm not convinced our traditional tactics will work against an enemy that doesn't know when they're supposed to be defeated. The first direct engagement wasn't even supposed to be a battle. Just a simple intercept operation, 6 of our elite vanguard troops against 4 human scouts who had ventured too close to our primary research facility on the asteroid's northern quadrant. Standard procedure. Terminate or capture, file report, return to base. Should have taken less than 10 minutes. It lasted nearly 3 hours. They just kept shooting back. Sergeant Drax shouted during his debriefing, his voice modulator crackling with residual stress hormones. We severed one's arm completely, the limb fell off, and he tucked his weapon under his remaining arm and continued firing. The holographic replay confirmed his account. The human in question, blood pumping from the traumatic amputation, had managed to kill 2 Vanguard soldiers before finally succumbing to blood loss. The recording showed the human's life signs gradually diminishing while his combat effectiveness barely decreased. This defies everything we know about battlefield psychology, Lieutenant Commander Vozick muttered, unfreezing the playback on the image of another human with a gaping chest wound, still lobbing explosive devices. Any rational species would have retreated after the first casualty. Captain Jorax nodded grimly. Their neural pathways don't seem to process defeat as a survival option. They simply escalate until physically incapable of continuing. When Jorax submitted his preliminary findings to High Command, the response was immediate and dismissive. Report contains tactical exaggerations and emotional contamination. Reassess with objective parameters. They think I'm making this up. Jorax slammed his appendage against the console, causing Lieutenant Pelnar to flinch. Fine. Let's give them something even they can't deny. The next day, Operation Deep Probe was authorized. New orders flashed across secure channels. Capture minimum 3 human specimens. Priority on minimizing physical damage. Full neurological and physiological mapping required. That night, Jorax recorded a personal log. I've studied 17 sentient species across 9 galactic sectors. All have clear biological imperatives for self-preservation that override combat protocols when faced with certain defeat. All except humans. What could possibly drive an evolutionary path so counterintuitive? And more. Importantly, how do we fight an enemy that doesn't know it's supposed to lose? The strike team departed at first light, unaware they were about to provide even more disturbing evidence of humanity's relentless nature. Dr. Nalith Vren had built her reputation on understanding the neurological functions of sentient species. She'd mapped the brain patterns of Kualurian hive minds, decoded the shared consciousness of Beltorian gas entities, and even untangled the 12-lobed thought processes of the ancient Jerk. Nothing had prepared her for humans. "This makes absolutely no sense," she hissed, tapping her claw against the neural scan hovering above the examination table. The captured human, a female soldier who had killed 5 hegemony warriors before being subdued, lay sedated, but still occasionally thrashed against her restraints. "Look here," Dr. Vren pointed to a pulsing red section of the brain scan. "Every known sentient species has neural pathways that activate when defeat is inevitable. It triggers retreat behaviors, surrender protocols, or at minimum self-preservation instincts. Humans have these pathways. They exist. But something overrides them." Captain Jorax leaned closer to the scan. "Some kind of evolutionary advantage?" "That's the most disturbing part," Dr. Vren replied, pulling up comparison data. "From an evolutionary standpoint, it's suicidal. The Miktari will abandon their young to survive. The Holdar will sacrifice limbs through automatic detachment. Even the warlike Jacksonians know precisely when to retreat based on mathematically perfect risk assessment." She gestured toward their sedated captive. "But humans? They've developed some kind of neural override system. Their brains literally ignore survival warnings when engaged in combat for their social unit." The second captured human, a male with 3 plasma wounds across his torso that should have been instantly fatal, had remained conscious for 20 minutes after capture, repeatedly threatening the medical team despite catastrophic blood loss. "They don't just fight through pain," Vren continued, bringing up hormone analysis data. "They use it. Their bodies release compounds that temporarily enhance strength, speed reaction time, and most alarmingly, seem to intensify aggressive responses rather than triggering escape behaviors." General Qualix, who had arrived from high command that morning, growled impatiently. "Skip the scientific fascination, Doctor. Can we weaponize this knowledge? Can we shut them down?" "That's what you're not understanding, General," Dr. Vren said, her voice rising with frustration. "Every species has an off button, a point where survival becomes the only imperative. The Volgorian army will disband instantly if their queen transmits the retreat pheromone. The Stenari forces collapse if exactly 51.3% of their soldiers fall. These are biological constants throughout the galaxy. But humans? They'll fight with broken limbs, punctured organs, while bleeding out sometimes even after we've confirmed brain death." The room fell silent. Finally, General Qualix spoke. "We need to understand the full extent of this abnormality. Theoretical analysis is insufficient." "What are you proposing?" Captain Jorax asked, though his expression suggested he already knew. "Controlled combat scenarios," the general replied coldly. "Push captured specimens to their limits. Document everything. Find the breaking point everyone must have." Dr. Vren's skin paled. "With respect, General, based on preliminary data, I don't believe." "I don't recall asking for your ethical assessment," Dr. Qualix interrupted. "This is now a matter of hegemony security. Prepare your laboratory for combat testing. We need to understand exactly what we're facing before we commit our forces to full engagement." As they filed out, Dr. Vren whispered to Captain Jorax, "I've studied 37 sentient species across the known galaxy. All have evolved with functional survival imperatives. If humans truly lack this, they're not just dangerous. They're terrifying." Military testing facility XR7 had been originally designed for weapons evaluation. Today, It evaluated something far more dangerous: human combat response. General Qualix observed from behind reinforced viewing panels, flanked by Dr. Vren and Captain Jorax. "Begin Scenario 1, the General ordered." Below in the testing chamber, the force field containing 3 human prisoners, 2 males and 1 female, deactivated. Simultaneously, a compartment opened, releasing 2 Krongar hunting beasts, vicious predators used for perimeter security on high-value installations. Standard protocol dictates allowing prey species to recognize superior force, the technician narrated clinically. Most sentients will display submission behaviors within 30 seconds of Krongar exposure. The humans did not. The female, designation H3, immediately backed against the wall, eyes scanning for weapons. The larger male H1 positioned himself between the beasts and his companions. The third human, H2, somehow pried loose a metal conduit from the wall. "Fascinating," Dr. Vren muttered, monitoring their biological readings. Their stress hormones are spiking, but not triggering flight response. They're synchronizing their movements without verbal communication. What happened next caused even General Qualix to step backward. When the first Krongar lunged, the humans didn't scatter as expected. They converged. H1 took the brunt of the attack, suffering deep lacerations, but managing to grip the creature's primary sensory stalk. H2 drove the improvised metal weapon through the creature's neural cluster, while H3 gouged at its vision organs with bare fingers. The second Krongar fell even faster. "Did you see that?" Dr. Vren's voice trembled with scientific excitement and horror. "Their injury response is its backward. Look at H1's readings after being wounded." The data was undeniable. The human's combat effectiveness had increased after injury. Scenario 2, General Qualix ordered, his voice notably less confident. The next 4 scenarios yielded similar results. Against automated defense systems, the humans used coordinated tactics. Against overwhelming odds, they became more aggressive rather than submissive. When one human was isolated, the others displayed what Dr. Vren termed exponential aggression increase, fighting harder to reach their separated companion. "Their pack bonding mechanisms override individual survival," she explained, reviewing the data between tests. "And there's something else. See this neural pattern? When H3 witnessed H2 being injured, her combat effectiveness increased by 43%. They fight harder when watching their companions suffer." Captain Jorax's skin had turned a sickly yellow. "You're saying they're motivated by revenge?" "Precisely. While most species interpret the injury of group members as a signal to retreat, humans interpret it as a signal to escalate." Dr. Vren pulled up comparison charts. The Taurans retreat after 10% casualties. The Nexorians after 30%. Humans? We haven't found their threshold yet. General Qualix pounded his limb against the console. "Every species has a breaking point. Push them harder." "Sir," the security officer interrupted. "The test subjects are showing unusual behavior patterns." On the monitors, the 3 humans had positioned themselves in the chamber's corner, whispering. Blood-covered and injured, they should have been docile, waiting for the next test. Instead, their vital signs showed increasing alertness. "They're planning something," Captain Jorax said quietly. "Stop the test." Too late. When Scenario 6 began, the humans didn't engage the threat. Instead, they attacked the observation sensors, the environmental controls, and then the door mechanisms with a coordination that suggested they'd been analyzing the facility's weaknesses throughout the previous tests. The alarms blared as containment protocols failed across 3 sectors. How did they know the override sequence? The security officer shouted over the klaxons. Dr. Vren's eyes widened in realization. They watched us. Every time we entered the test codes, every security protocol, they weren't just surviving our tests. They were studying us back. General Qualix grabbed the facility-wide communication system. "All personnel. Priority Alpha. Human test subjects have escaped containment." They are to be considered. He hesitated, then for the first time in his military career, used the highest threat designation, Class Omega Combatants. Extreme caution authorized. Captain Jorax stared at the blood-smeared, empty test chamber. "We built this facility to find their weakness," he said quietly. "Instead, we showed them ours." Admiral Zulax strode confidently across the command deck of the Hegemony's flagship, the Indomitable Virtue. His skin glowed with the deep blue hue of absolute certainty as he addressed his officers. "The human response force is exactly as we predicted: 3 capital ships, 14 support vessels, and approximately 2,000 troops. Our forces outnumber theirs 7-1. He gestured to the tactical display where numerous Hegemony vessels surrounded the small human fleet. "This will be a brief and educational correction." Fleet Intelligence Officer Trakos cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, respectfully, the escape test subjects, they've likely informed the human command about our research." Admiral Zulax dismissed this with a wave of his appendage. "All the better. Let them come with their anger and their vengeance. These emotions make species predictable. We will demonstrate the futility of their resistance, accept their surrender, and normalize relations as we have with countless other species." Captain Jorax, newly assigned as Special Advisor on Human Combat Tactics, stepped forward. "Admiral, my research strongly suggests we should reconsider our approach. Humans don't respond to traditional force projection. They—" "Captain," the Admiral interrupted, "I've reviewed your reports. Fascinating research, truly. But you're missing the fundamental truth. Numbers matter. Technology matters. We have both advantages. Now let's end this unpleasantness." 6 hours later, the Indomitable Virtue was listing badly, venting atmosphere from multiple hull breaches as emergency barriers strained to contain the damage. Status report. Admiral Zulax screamed over the blaring alarms, his skin now a sickly yellow of absolute terror. "The human vessels bypassed our forward screen by flying through our defensive formation," the tactical officer stammered. "They sacrificed 2 ships to create openings for the others. We didn't anticipate suicide tactics from their capital ships." On the view screen, the human vessels continued their relentless assault. When the Hegemony forces had encircled them, the humans had broken into smaller groups, each seemingly acting independently yet somehow coordinated. They ignored targets of opportunity to strike at critical systems. They took devastating losses without breaking formation or retreating. 78% of our long-range sensors are offline, reported the sensor officer. They specifically targeted our coordination capabilities rather than our weapons. Jorax stepped beside the Admiral, his voice calm but urgent. "Sir, my research predicted this. Humans don't fight to minimize casualties. They fight to win, regardless of cost. Their battle doctrine isn't about preserving force strength, it's about mission accomplishment at any price." A tremendous explosion rocked the flagship as a human vessel, already critically damaged and trailing debris, deliberately rammed one of their defensive platforms. "They're insane," whispered the Admiral. "No sane species sacrifices ships with crew still aboard." "Not insane," Jorax corrected. "Different. Their neural reward pathways prioritize group success over individual survival. They've evolved with a completely different understanding of victory." Another explosion, closer this time. Emergency lighting flickered throughout the command deck. "The Parker Davis has breached our inner defensive ring," the tactical officer reported. "They've lost 40% of their hull integrity, but they're still accelerating." "Impossible. Their structural integrity can't withstand that kind of stress," the Admiral shouted. "They've reinforced their bow with debris from their own destroyed support ships," the sensor officer replied, disbelief evident in his voice. They're using their own wreckage as a battering ram." Jorax accessed the communication system. "Sir, they're broadcasting on all frequencies." The main screen flickered to show a human commander, blood streaming from a cut above her eye. Behind her, her bridge was in shambles, bodies of fallen crew members still at their stations. "This is Captain Megan Alvarez of the United Earth ship Parker Davis," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "We know what you did to our people. We know about your experiments. There will be no surrender. There will be no negotiation. There will only be this: you will release every human in your custody, withdraw from our territory, and never return. Otherwise, we will hunt down every ship, every station, every colony involved in this atrocity." The transmission ended. Admiral Zulek stared at the blank screen, then at the tactical display showing the remains of his once mighty fleet scattered across the battlefield. "Send the withdrawal signal," he whispered. "All ships, full retreat." 3 days later, the Galactic Council convened its first emergency session in 7 centuries. The central chamber was filled with representatives from every major species, all talking over each other in rising panic. The humans destroyed 67% of the hegemony's 7th fleet. The Taurian ambassador shouted, "A fleet that has subjugated 11 species without a single defeat." They utilized tactics that no rational species would employ. The Mictari representative added, "Reports indicate they specifically targeted command vessels, ignoring their own losses entirely." High Chancellor Zolan raised all 4 of his appendages for silence. "We have convened this emergency session to address what preliminary reports are calling the human problem. As disturbing as these military tactics are, what concerns me more is the underlying psychology they represent." He nodded to Dr. Vren, who stepped into the center of the chamber. Her research had made her the foremost authority on human combat psychology, a position she had never wanted. "Distinguished representatives," she began, "what we witnessed was not an aberration. It was not desperation. It was standard human combat doctrine. My research indicates that humans evolved on a planet with such intense competition that they developed neural pathways that override standard survival imperatives." She projected images of human combat actions, annotated with neural scans. "They don't fight to survive. They fight to win." And this distinction, while subtle, represents a fundamental difference in approach that none of our tactical doctrines are designed to address. The chamber erupted in fearful murmurs. High Chancellor Zolan leaned forward. "Doctor, in your expert opinion, how should we proceed?" Dr. Vren's gaze swept across the assembled representatives. "Treat them with respect. Engage them diplomatically. And above all, do not provoke them. Because now they know we exist, and they will never, ever stop if they believe we threaten them." The Grand Neutrality Station hung in space, like a gleaming silver disk, its diplomatic quarters now hosting the most tense negotiations in recent galactic history. Captain Jorax had never expected to be here, promoted to senior diplomatic advisor due to his unique insights into human psychology. Some honor. More like being the only one willing to sit in the same room with them. "I still don't understand why we're negotiating at all," grumbled Ambassador Clorn, his ceremonial garments rustling as he paced. "We outnumber them thousands to 1. "Numbers mean nothing if you can't make them surrender," Jorax replied, watching through the observation panel as the human delegation approached. "Remember the tactical modeling? Even with our technological edge, the simulations show we'd lose 18 major colonies before containing them." "Containment isn't victory," added Dr. Vren, now heading the newly formed Department of Human Studies. The diplomatic chamber doors hissed open. The human delegation was smaller than expected, just 3 representatives led by a silver-haired woman with commanding presence. Admiral Zulek had described her voice during the battle. This was Captain Alvarez of the Parker Davis. "Shall we begin?" she said without preamble, taking a seat. The first hour was excruciating formal protests, demands for reparations, thinly veiled threats. But gradually, as mandated by the Council's diplomatic protocols, the conversation shifted toward understanding. "Your combat psychology is unique among galactic species," Dr. Vren stated carefully. "We seek to understand why your evolutionary path favored such persistent aggression." Captain Alvarez exchanged glances with her companions. "Earth, our homeworld, was not kind to early humans. We evolved as pack hunters who had to persist through injury, who had to chase prey to exhaustion. Later, we survived through cooperation and sacrifice. Individuals who abandoned the group didn't pass on their genes. But surely once you develop civilization, such traits became obsolete? Ambassador Clorn asked. The human male introduced as Dr. Thomas Reeves, anthropologist, shook his head. Our history is filled with examples of smaller forces defeating larger ones through sheer determination. Thermopylae, Masada, the Alamo, Dunkirk. Each defeat that showed incredible determination became a rallying cry for greater resistance. You celebrate your defeats. Jorax couldn't hide his confusion. We celebrate courage, Alvarez corrected. Standing your ground when logic says run, fighting when calculation says surrender. These aren't just tactical decisions for us, they're cultural touchstones. Dr. Vren's recording appendage moved frantically. But the biochemical override of your survival instinct. We call it going down swinging, interrupted the third human, a burly man with numerous scars. Nobody wants to die. But if we're going to die, we're taking as many of you with us as possible. A heavy silence fell across the room. Finally, Jorax spoke. And if we had continued experimenting on your captured soldiers? For the first time, Captain Alvarez's professional demeanor cracked, revealing something cold and dangerous beneath. Then this wouldn't be a negotiation. It would be an extermination. Yours. The treaty took 4 days to draft. Its terms were unprecedented, mutual non-aggression, shared technological exchange, and most importantly, a whole new set of interspecies protocols regarding human prisoners. The Galactic standard for ethical treatment of combatants had to be completely rewritten. As the final documents were signed, Ambassador Clorn leaned toward Jorax. Do you really think this will hold? That we can trust them? Jorax watched Captain Alvarez shake hands with the High Chancellor. Oddly enough, yes, because the one thing my research showed clearly is that humans keep their word, even when keeping it hurts them. They call it honor. Another concept we'll need to understand. An official hegemony intelligence report, classified Omega level. Subject, human combat psychology, final assessment. Author, Captain Jorax Menz, Senior Xenop Psychology Specialist. 3 standard cycles have passed since the Treaty of Neutrality Station. The diplomatic channels remain open, trade agreements have been established, and 17 human cultural exchange officers now serve aboard hegemony vessels. To most, it appears the crisis has passed. They are wrong. I submit this final report not to renew hostilities, but to ensure we never again underestimate these beings. The humans have an expression, peace through strength. They respect power, but only when it's tempered with wisdom. Our revised military doctrine now incorporates what we've learned, the flexible response protocol that acknowledges human unpredictability. We've abandoned the tactical certainty matrix that served us for millennia. Battle simulations now include human factor variables that would have been considered irrational just 1 cycle ago. Never corner a human force is now the first rule taught to our military cadets. The second, a human defeat is not the same as a human surrender. The most significant finding of my research is this: humans don't just lack an off switch, they possess what I term a reverse escalation response. When most species face increasing danger, their commitment to fighting decreases proportionally. With humans, commitment to combat increases with threat level. Our encounter with them could have ended in mutual destruction. Instead, it has become something unexpected, a partnership. The Council initially approached humans as primitive subjects to be studied and controlled. We now recognize them as valuable allies whose unique psychology complements our own strengths. Their insistence on pushing boundaries, their refusal to accept limitations, their willingness to sacrifice for abstract concepts like honor and freedom, these traits that baffled us initially now drive joint research initiatives and exploration missions. Last month, when the Hive Collective threatened Outpost 73, it was a human crewed ship that responded first, holding off the attack until our battlecruisers arrived. The humans lost 17 crew members, but never considered withdrawal. After the battle, I asked their commander why they fought so hard for an outpost that wasn't even their own. His response, because you'd do the same for us. That's what allies do. I'm not certain we would have, before knowing them. I believe we would now. To the various representatives receiving this report, I cannot stress strongly enough the importance of maintaining good relations with humanity. Their friendship is invaluable, their enmity is catastrophic. They hold grudges for generations. They tell stories of battles fought thousands of years ago, as if they happened yesterday. Their concept of vengeance extends beyond individual lifespans. This is not a call for fear. It is a call for respect. Humans respond to respect more positively than any species I've encountered. Treat them as equals, acknowledge their achievements, and they become the most loyal allies imaginable. Treat them as inferiors, and they will defy you until their extinction or yours. As for the broader philosophical implications, the galaxy has always assumed that sentient evolution follows predictable patterns. Intelligence requires cooperation, which requires surrender mechanisms and group preservation instincts. Humans evolve differently. They cooperate through conflict, not despite it. Their social bonds are forged in adversity, not in comfort. They have a concept they call the human spirit, an intangible quality that emerges most strongly when they face impossible odds. I've observed it firsthand. I still don't fully understand it, but I've learned to recognize it and to respect it. We entered this conflict believing we were studying primitive beings. We ended it realizing we were the ones with much to learn. In conclusion, humans don't have an off switch. They have something infinitely more dangerous, a volume knob that only goes up. End report. Captain Jorax closed the file and leaned back in his chair, watching the distant blue-green orb of Earth through the viewport of the diplomatic vessel. Tomorrow he would begin his new assignment as the first hegemony ambassador to Earth. The position was considered either a great honor or a death sentence, depending on who you asked. His communication panel chimed. A message from Captain Alvarez, now heading the Human Diplomatic Corps. Looking forward to working together, Ambassador. My grandmother has a saying, the most dangerous fights are the ones you don't know you're in. At least now we see each other clearly. Jorax smiled, a human expression he'd adopted recently. Yes, they saw each other clearly now. And somehow, that made all the difference.